Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming and participating in this panel. We've got a really great group of people to talk to you about blockchain cryptocurrency's role in the XR media space. So I would like to introduce them, but before they do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of my perspective. So what I say is VR is heaven and blockchain is earth. And AI is how we talk between the two of them. My name is Anne Greenberg. I'm best known for founding Gracenote, which is the largest entertainment data company in the world at this point, and was really a precursor to blockchain. We had many of the elements of a blockchain. We're the first crowdsourced company, and we started that in the early 90s. So come forward about 25 years, and what I've been saying to everybody is blockchain is really evolutionary, not revolutionary. And these things are inevitable. It's not that they don't have some kind of qualitative difference to what's come before. We just haven't seen it totally expressed yet. And what's so exciting about this whole space is that we can actually create new frameworks to create new kinds of meaning so that people can actually have new kinds of thinking in all sorts of parts of their lives. So let's get started here. And I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves and what they're doing in the blockchain space. So we'll start with Victor.
Hi, everyone. Victor. I don't know if is this working. Okay. Victor here. I manage digital innovation at BASF. I'm based here in Silicon Valley. Working on a lot of different activities within digitalization. Obviously, it's a very broad term. So blockchain, VR, AR, XR, if you want to call that. In that space, we work mainly with startups and can also invest in some of that space as well. So I can talk a little bit about some of the projects that we're working on later in the session.
Thanks, Victor. And we have Dana Loberg.
Hi, my name is Dana, and I'm also locally based here in Silicon Valley. We are, Leo AR is an augmented reality platform. We are the #1 consumer-facing app in AR today. We allow people to use realistic 3D objects, place them in their surroundings, and interact with the new world that they've created. We also have a marketplace allowing artists to upload their 3D realistic objects and distribute them through our platform and monetize their work. And we're using or considering blockchain. It's something that we've been discussing internally for about a year now. So I'm traditionally funded by large VCs here in the Bay Area. So it's actually a big decision to move to the blockchain if we do it. And I can discuss why it makes sense for the marketplace, our platform, and things like that going forward.
Great, thank you so much. And we have Hrish Lotlikar.
Thanks for having me. So I'm a co-founder of the Rogue Initiative. We're a film, TV, VR, and gaming studio in Hollywood. My production partners are Michael Bay, the action director, Linda Opes, who's known for Interstellar and Contact, and we work on mainly action and science fiction, new original IP that we take across mediums, across all those mediums from film, TV, VR, and gaming. So we create franchises. We're looking at using blockchain in terms of monetization. We've recently gotten into the esports space as well. So we're looking at some blockchain applications to that. And then I'm also co-founder of another company called SuperWorld, also based in Los Angeles. My co-founder there is Max Woon, who co-founded Xfire. And what SuperWorld does is it allows users and companies to personalize their world and to allow gamers to develop on SuperWorld, to create AR on the platform. We have a marketplace where users can buy and sell AR created by developers. And then finally, we're integrating into the blockchain very soon and doing a pre-sale very soon in June, where users can buy SuperWorld coin to lease space-time real estate in the real world, and we'll have an advertising platform where SuperWorld, as well as other AR developers, can, post AR ads onto those specific areas of space-time real estate that users can lease.
Next is Michelle Tsing, the CEO of Hats Token.
Hi, so I am the co-founder and CEO of Hats Token. Hats Token is a decentralized Yelp for ICO and token companies. And users, when you review and rate ICOs, you get tokens for doing that. Also, we have 2 protocols, one for detecting scams and fraud, and then validated on the back end via consensus. And the other one is called Crypto Enthusiast Protocol that protects the crypto enthusiasts' identity security and also allow them to have privacy controls. I was in blockchain I was introduced to crypto in about 2012, 2013. I was a counsel for PayPal for 6 years. After I left that job, I wanted to do a startup. And so I pushed together a panel for venture labs on cryptocurrency. After that, in 2015, I co-founded a payments company on the blockchain. So I'm pretty passionate about the space. I'm excited about how blockchain can change the world and lead to a really awesome revolution. Thank you.
Nicole Lazzaro.
Right, I'm from XEODesign and Zia Play, a 25-year veteran of the game industry. I'm a VR developer, developing a game, Follow the White Rabbit, which is here, and which we've been showing at the show. And I, among other things, I designed the first iPhone game, and I really love playing in the space of technology and design. I've worked on games such as Myst and The Sims, Star Wars, Diner Dash, a lot of very mass market game properties. And so I'm going to be talking today about some of our thoughts as we are exploring for White Rabbit and other things that we're doing. What does this new blockchain crypto space mean in terms of new frontiers for game design and human engagement?
Great. And before we go into the panel a little more, I want to understand sort of where the audience is coming from. I'd like to ask a few questions. How many people are new to blockchain? Can you raise your hands? Okay. And how many people are kind of more into it? You're trading cryptocurrencies, or you own some, and okay, we have a lot of that. And how about people who have actually built their own blockchain? Okay, and smart contracts, you've written them, designed them. Great, okay. So because we have a lot of people who are new, and I suspected that, we're going to do a little bit of an overview of how blockchain works. This is just a generic thing. You can find all sorts of incredible descriptions on the web. Lots of books have been written now about blockchain that are easily understood. And I'm going to have Michelle take this one and take us through this kind of process a little bit so that you can understand just at a base level what it is that everybody is so excited about.
Sure. Blockchain is a public ledger, and it has certain properties, right, or characteristics. One, it is immutable. So records are kept into a public database, and after it's kept there, you cannot erase it. So there is accountability, right? And second is encrypted, right? So there's cryptocurrency, involves cryptography, right? So, it's hard to hack. There's hashes involved. So you guys heard of the story of Alice and Bob. I always, think of them as people, bodyguards, of the chain. And it's also transparent, as you can see. And I think really the basic structure of it is that it involves, and it can. I think what I just described is the basic structure of blockchain, and there's a lot of implementation choices, such as consensus, which is really P2P nodes. So you have distribution, a peer-to-peer, right? So you have different nodes, and they communicate with each other, and so your identity, it's very important because with protocols and blockchain, you could have interoperability, which means that the technology and your information can go across platforms, which makes it very different and useful and unique.
Yes, and I think that some of the major harbingers of blockchain are that with the internet, what we had was the ability to move information at scale. What we get with the blockchain is that we can move information at scale securely because everything is cryptographically sealed. However, that means it doesn't mean that it's private because, in fact, these things are very transparent. And And even though the blockchain has its roots in cryptocurrency specifically in somewhat of the dark web, where people thought they could get away with a lot of stuff, I think you have to be an absolute idiot to be a criminal on blockchain, because once police forces and AIs are versed enough in cryptography, everything is out there, and it's immutable. That said, we have all different kinds of blockchains, as Michelle was alluding to, which we have permission blockchains, we have private blockchains, we have blockchains like Hyperledger, which are designed for businesses that don't really want to have a public input. So these things are inevitable, they're going to happen because you get too much out of these as a business in terms of economy of scale and efficiencies. What happens here is machines are creating a trust network, and and the smart contracts are automating the interactions, and what you get with that, essentially, is you don't have, well, middle women, let's call it that way, okay?
So, and what is a smart contract?
Okay, a smart contract is something that actually memorializes in code a relationship between some parties and allows the transactions to happen. So it's, some people say, oh, it's going to put the lawyers out of business. But no, we're going to have a lot of legal battles over this, and they're being fought right now. So I'm going to go just a little further here. I threw this slide in here, this slide in here, just so you can see, for anybody who doesn't know what a blockchain kind of looks like, what you're doing is you're creating a series of records. And each record is linked to the last record, and these things are basically taking ledgers and mirroring them across the world on all of these nodes. What we started with was mining with Satoshi, who was the pseudonymous author of his white paper, which described the blockchain underneath Bitcoin. But these things are this is the most basic version of it, right? So we're going to have, one of the things about blockchain is that if you're mirroring these things across all nodes, they go very slowly. Ethereum has like 30 transactions per second. They have plans to try to speed that up, move from proof of work, which is the mining, to proof of stake. But we also have companies like EOS, which are launching literally this weekend. They've tested up to 27,000 transactions per second. They're going to cap it in the first release at 5,000. So there's a balancing that you're doing between speed and stability. So I want to ask the panelists for examples of XR companies working in blockchain that they particularly admire. And they can talk about their own company, but I'd also like to hear about some of the others.
I can go.
Dana.
There's a company, I think it's in Latin America, or the founders, called Decentraland. And it's actually here. And they're doing something similar that we were considering in the VR space, where you can like purchase land, lease the land, and decorate the land with like Minecraft-like 3D objects. And you can charge people to come in and experience their creativity or whatever they built on that land for a price, whether it's paid or free, they get to decide. And it's like basically a virtual world in the real world, and I think we kind of have more of an AR concept of that versus the VR, but I think it's a pretty strong company, and they were one of the first to do this in the blockchain.
Great. Hrish?
I love what she just said about Decentraland. I think it's very interesting. Arcona is another one that's doing something very similar. There's a company that we have a partnership with, which is called Lucid AR, which has, it's an AR hardware glasses manufacturer, but they're building out an ecosystem of apps in AR that kind of go onto their hardware. So kind of a similar concept that kind of allows anyone to build anything in AR. So I think they're super interesting as well.
Great, thank you so much.
I like gaming and AR, VR, and cross reality. So I'm thinking about mine is definitely convergence. It's C4D. and they're making a digital utopia. So they're using the blockchain for in-game objects and inventories that are tracked and placed on the blockchain. So I went to the GDC as well, and I'm really excited about the convergence and use of blockchain into gaming, and also across reality. I'm really, really excited about playing some of these games as well.
Victor, do you have some examples of immersive technologies using blockchain in your industry?
Yeah, so we're working with a company called Reflect. I know they're here. Basically, immersing consumers in, let's say, a virtual car show, right? So we've designed, so as a chemical materials company, we've designed together with car companies like Hyundai, for example, a concept car in virtual reality that consumers can go in to see what new materials that BASF is providing to Hyundai to develop this new kinds of concept cars. And you can imagine the link to blockchain there is I think, relatively natural and pretty easy, right? So if you're able to actually then purchase or make transactions to, let's say, future cars or cars that you like, or materials for, let's say, B2B, to different auto manufacturers, to the materials that we're showcasing in these concept cars. That's one of the companies that we're working with, and they're in Europe.
And integrated into blockchain for supply side stuff, is correct?
Yeah, that's possible too.
Nicole, you want to tell us what companies you've been admiring lately?
Well, I want to really talk more about the future, so I don't want to jump the schedule. In my imagination, it's some kind of cross between CryptoKitties and Pokemon Go. So I'm going to just say that.
Great. I put on the slide here, High Fidelity just did a deal with Block V, which is a company that got a very, very senior set of advisors behind that company. So those of you who are interested in wanting to take a look at what the partnership that they just announced. Of course, High Fidelity, founded by Phil Rosedahl, who founded Second Life, had some very, very early cryptocurrencies, Linden dollars, inside of Second Life. And if you're coming from the gaming world, as Nicole, as you're going to see, in-game monetization models really, really map well to understanding cryptocurrencies. Now, there are all different kinds of tokenization models. We're not going to dive into that too much here unless people have questions. But there's a lot to learn in blockchain, and like I said, there's just too much for both banks and industry to ignore. And eventually, we'll see all countries going to e-currencies, if not cryptocurrencies. So those will start to be mapped to fiat, but it's kind of like the sort of the pirates against the established people at this point in terms of the development of those things. So I would like to ask the blockchain, the panel, what they think are the barriers to entry and adoption for immersive blockchain applications, how they're thinking about what they're building and designing, and how they're going to manage the fact that even though, like I said, from my perspective, it's an evolution, and it's, these things can even be traced back to the 1940s, why we're still very early at this moment in blockchain. Who would like to take that? Dana.
So for our company, I would say that the reason it's so early is that you're seeing a lot, like when we were considering building on the blockchain on Ethereum with our own token, we reached out to agencies that, help you to build it. And there's so much uncertainty of like, are they really experts? Do they have a lot of engineers behind the team? Can they really build it? Or can you just build it internally? Because we're all learning it at the same time. So all my backend engineers are obsessed with the blockchain. They've been mining it secretly since 2012. So for us, it's kind of like there's so much uncertainty of like who's really an expert, who's not an expert. Also, there's a lot of new companies coming out that are helping you build out the API for building out the token. Like Simple Token is a company that we're working with that like we can easily build it ourselves and kind of keep the trust within our company versus having to partner with an agency to help us build it. And the other thing that's a hindrance for us or a barrier is that in AR, the phone is still the in-between kind of way that we're experiencing AR, and we're really waiting for glass to become more fluid and part of our lives, which will probably happen around 2020, they're saying. So until that happens, it's like there's still 2 years of gap that we don't feel it's super important to do the blockchain right away when we're still waiting for the glass, and it'll be way easier to really live in these like mixed reality worlds.
Is anybody running into international issues since we are in the U.S. under SEC regulation? Anything that you've encountered that has given you pause
Yeah,
or a different strategy?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that because that was actually the thing that kind of gave us some pause and just make sure that we're doing it the right way, which is something that we're very closely looking at in terms of what's going on with regulation and the potential risks that some of these ICOs could be judged as security tokens. And so we, in our case, we definitely want to make sure that we're building a utility token and so looking at how to basically make sure that we're doing it in the right way and safe and doing it with as much legal guidance as we can get. And I think that's an issue. And you see some domiciles globally being very open to the opposite, Japan and Switzerland.
Here in the U.S., we're really at a disadvantage when you're a developer and entrepreneur in terms of going out and just building one of these things, because you can't even really promote it because you're promoting a security. The SEC has really taken a view that these are securities, but they're going to be clarifying that over time. You can look at things like the crowdfund bill and do various raises up to $1 million and then up to $50 million if you submit your paperwork before that. So there are mechanisms. This is really, in many ways, the next step in crowdfunding, but we need to get our regulations together here in the U.S. And so you'll find that people who are doing, for instance, ICOs, initial coin offerings, if they're a U.S.-based company, they can't take investment from non-qualified U.S. investors, and they have this duty to know their customer, and so they're going to register people, they're going to check, and it's really kind of taking some of the. I don't happen to like those barriers, frankly. I think people should be able to, there should be some other kind of test except, besides wealth, which says that you have the knowledge to be able to invest in something. However, the U.S., we have other things that we have to do. So we're moving toward a securitized model where in the U.S., if you're a U.S.-based company, you need to do a security offering first, and then at that point, you could do a separate or related foundation or company outside of the U.S. that's responsible for the care and feeding and generation of the tokens.
So I would wonder.
Nicole, please.
Yeah. So I really think it's really more of a the biggest obstacle right now is really a crisis of the imagination of what this new technology can do. So could I have that slide?
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Yeah. So in terms of Metcalfes Law, which everyone in the room knows, we had the value of the network increases with the number of nodes. This is all assuming that and I use this actually model to predict things like YouTube, Facebook, and Facebook gaming, Farmville, before they happened. Metcalfe, though, in this sense, if you think about an MMO, like wow, all of it is going to a central server or shards of a server, all of the activity. Now, in this new world, it's actually, if you think of this network of nodes, each node actually has a ledger, partial or complete ledger, and so in a sense, it's actually we have a whole other dimension of the of the internet. So if you think of the internet as a 2D plane, blockchain and cryptocurrency can actually create a fourth dimension. It kind of goes holographic and actually enables what we would call true peer-to-peer computing. And so when we think about that, it may not be just the not just tokens, not just contracts, not just securities, not just taking the economy of like World of Warcraft. We basically put all the smarts on the server and they make dumb clients to prevent hacking. In this world, we can actually put a lot more smarts in the actual individual nodes. And I think that's going to be really
It was just trending with edge computing as well.
Yeah, and then on the technology side, I'll have more later to say, I just want to give you a chance to, of what those design memes are and some opportunities that we haven't seen yet. So what's beyond Ethereum and EOS and stuff.
Yeah, so I just want to add to everyone's comments on the challenges of blockchain in terms of adoption. I think besides laws and technology and how everyone is new in the space, I want to talk a little bit about a few other challenges. One is community. I think a lot of entrepreneurs who are in the space does not know how to do community, because think about it, blockchain is really a lot about distribution because it's a distributed network, and distribution is related to community. So you see a lot of people out there who wants to help with community, but yet, how do you build community?
Well, and what's interesting to me about that, just riffing off of that, is that blockchain really is the most social technology we've developed so far. Internet, cell phones, Facebook, Twitter, those things are social. But without the social interaction at the node level, none of the crypto has any value. You could have a network of 10 million miners or 10 million users and only 2 miners, game over. Have a network.
And when nobody owns the network?
Well, yeah, and but it's the social value of these exchanges, and any token that's gone well has a community. It actually came from a community, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's dependent on whether whether you're a B2B company or you're just using the blockchain to settle coins. It depends on the use, but I think for the large part, community is very important. And then 2 is adoption, right? So mass adoption. So cryptocurrencies is, how do you use that? You can't say, hey, Amazon, I'm going to pay you 10 Ether for this 3D printer, and you can't go to Starbucks, because you would have to wait at least 10 minutes for them to get their money, right? Or to get their coin. So, how do we solve that adoption issue, that mass adoption issue, right? And then, 3, it's an international phenomenon. It's an international revolution, right? So how do we eliminate borders? And I think with that, it's really culture. I think each of us has a lot of biases, but how do we work with other people all over the world and make a project work? And transparency, right? And, with fraud and scams, that's what the SEC is trying to do. So how do we eliminate that?
So just in the very big picture, blockchain is a technology, and in the internet itself, that represent a very international global perspective. And what we see is in the very, very, very big picture, at least those of us in blockchain for a long time, is what we call the death of the nation state, that is falling by the wayside as a model, and that we have the rise of affinity groups. If you look at Facebook, it's one of the largest nations on the world, right? If you think about it in that sense. And you might have something that is more in common with someone on the other side of the world than you do your next door neighbor. And those affinity groups are going to start to have a lot of political clout. And in fact, I personally think there will be wars fought over these things. And one of the most central issues to all of blockchain, I have to take a moment to talk about it, is self-sovereign user ID, because the privacy issues here are tremendous. And when you combine that with facial recognition and biometrics, everything you do and say is going to be tracked. I mean, I've been a long proponent. This is why I encrypted Grace Notes protocol back in the 90s, that we should protect privacy and have a unique and anonymous user, because we can do a lot with that as creatives and as service providers. So you were going to say something, Victor.
Yeah, maybe the last point that I can add, the perspective from the actual user side. So from the actual industry side, I think this is important when Michelle was talking about adoption. I think from the tech and the developers, and maybe even from the investment side, it makes a lot of sense understanding and knowing what the value of blockchain and what the value of XR, and maybe even the value of decentralizing currency. This is all understood well from the tech side, but when you're talking about it from the industry side, there's a steep learning curve to that. So a lot of, I guess, people in my role, what we're trying to do is demonstrate that through pilots, make it a bit more tangible, the benefits or the value, purely economically to a large global industrial corporation, what that actually brings in terms of value. And so I think the advice, or at least what I talk to when I talk with the startups, is being able to connect on that of actual tangible value that you can bring is huge. And then it's my job to find someone in a large organization on the management level to basically buy into that. It's not easy. That's, I think, the hardest part, is to find that match and be the bridge between that. It can be political even within a company. You're talking about international.
Well, working into that, Victor, I think there's something really interesting. And again, it goes back to, from my perspective, it's a metaphor. Use of metaphor is a wonderful tool, because everything from the car to the paperclip has gone through an evolution. We used to have horse and buggies. Now we have autos. We had that awkward teenage stage, which is what we're really super early in, of a horseless carriage. It's neither one nor the other. We've locked into cryptocurrency, we've locked into blockchain, and that's actually limiting ourselves. We map it to a virtual economy like in World of Warcraft, we map it to a token like we might put in a subway stall, right, to make it. But this technology has many, many more applications. So think about, in Pokemon Go with Pikachu, you could earn that, basically the great battle of Pikachu battle of, 2023, you could actually own that Pikachu, right? And you could have that go around. In Times Square, you could have multiple ads, running, and you could be a site that sells those, those ads. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we've got this very open platform so multiple vendors can do it. And then in my world a bit, eco stuff is like I could actually verify, if that tree is planted, if I can see the money and I can
Right.
see the money wherever it went.
Right, exactly. And I actually call it the Internet of Nouns, not the Internet of Things. I call it people, places, and things. Because people, things, and places are all cryptographically represented in multiple blockchains in the future. And so, everything is going to be tracked, and you need to actually design your products to be able to take advantage of that. I want each of the panelists, starting with Michelle, to have one last comment before we go to questions. So please, give your best for the audience there.
Sure. I want you guys to, I advise a couple token and normal companies. So I want you guys to think about tokenomics. If you're thinking about integration of blockchain, because I think with crypto and blockchain, we have a hybrid almost, right? We have utility, some security. But when the coin is on the exchange, we have, coins that may or may not go up in value. And so I feel like there's almost a hybrid, and maybe the SEC needs to think about really using a new system of regulation. And I think the economic model, the tokenomics model, play a big part of what the XR company does, and how the coin play a role in it. So I think when you're doing an ICO, you basically integrate 5 or 10 concepts, and build the company in parallel to that. So it's fun.
Hrish?
I love, by the way, just this discussion, because it kind of blows your mind, all the things that are coming, humanistically, just in terms of data. I'd like to further expound on the data aspect of it, just because of what's, been going on recently with, GDPR and other things in terms of privacy. And, I think that Bitcoin and crypto and blockchain, all of these things conceptually are empowering people and allowing individuals to have more control over their data, over their privacy. So I'm very optimistic.
That's a choice, and we have to fight for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the past all data was controlled by big companies, and I think that with Bitcoin is going to change. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And as we look into AR and VR and these universes that we're creating, there's going to be a lot more data. And so I'm excited about applying the blockchain to empower users, to whether it's a space in AR or just their personal activity, have that ability to own that and maybe monetize on that. Just as miners, monetize
So
on.
we're really almost out of time, so I have to go to the audience and see if we have questions. Yes? I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Power usage. So are you referring to the incredible amounts of power that have to be used for proof of work in mining? I can't hear you. Yes, and so actually...
Absolutely, yes. I would say absolutely yes. And, I have a game, Tilt World, plants 16,000 trees in Madagascar. The usage of power, I think, in the creation of it and then the unlocking of it needs to be very well looked. Just like that Metcalfes Law diagram, we have multiple servers. We have an exponential increase in the power that's required.
The more nodes you have, the slower it's going to go. Okay, so the thing is that people are now moving to proof of stake, or even now with EOS, for example, which is basically, it had a year-long ICO. They've raised $4 billion in that year, and they'll be launching this weekend. They're going to what's called a delegated proof of stake. And what that is they have 21 master nodes, so you're not having to mirror it everywhere. They have 100 different backup producers that can come in and if those 21 nodes are not actually doing their job. You know, this structure, which Dan Larimer came up with, who, if you guys know what Steam is or BitShares, he was the architect of those, is one that balances more like, in the US, we actually have a republic, right? So we have a balance between, you know, we're not actually direct voting, you know, so in that case, we have a balancing of the systems. Does anyone else want to talk about the energy use?
Yeah, so I'm really into nuclear fusion, and I think, you know, with like breakthroughs in fusion, I'm just hoping that we can have more abundance of energy, and I think that has an interplay with the cryptocurrency and the mining world. I advise a Bitcoin mining company, so, and you know, and interview a bunch of people in terms of fusion and energy for my radio show. So if you Google like Laptop Radio on YouTube, you'll see or hear some of my interviews on nuclear fusion, and hope that
There's also old technology, dielectric cooling, which is coming back into the fore, where you can lose all of the cooling mechanisms in the server rooms, and you just put your chipset right into this dielectric non-conductive fluid. It's incredible, actually. So
Great.
another
If we can
question?
take the question actually from Slido up there.
We have a Slido question.
yes.
Role play. Let's walk through a real-life use case where one of the digital currency CEOs sells Victor, procurement from BASF, on what he should buy with coin.
Why buy with coin versus
Why
the change
buy
in
with
your
coin?
pocket?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
I want dollars that have like a little chip in it, and it knows wherever it went, and it could get like extra. You know, basically, you could use crypto to you get extra credit if you spent that dollar locally, and then I could see, you know, a power of 10 effect or network effect on like how much good I did in the world because I did this, as opposed to going to, you know, my local coffee shop as opposed to Starbucks, and I get an end of the year score. That might be my answer. Sorry, Victor.
yeah, I mean, maybe just to add on that, procurement is super meticulous and also all about KPI, right? So again, I may be a bit more pragmatic. You have to show the value, and it has to be tangible. And for procurement in particular, we can say that yes, it's transparent, and yes, there's sort of the openness in terms of the value, or maybe you can even automate and take away some of the steps when it comes to transactions. But that's, I think, is not enough. It has to even go down to where can you demonstrate discounts or value. That's what kind of gets the light bulb first for people, especially within our procurement or legal. Again, it has to be purely pragmatic. That's the only way it can work, I think, in large industry.
So I
particular
can
companies.
add to Victor, since we co-founded a payments company that allows you to send payments anywhere in the world and cross platforms.
What's it called?
In the cloud, and so, you know, I wanted to buy a dress. I mean, I wanted to buy a dress or make a dress, and I would use the blockchain because my transaction fees will be lower. You know, like even with PayPal, it's 2.9 plus 3, right? So, you know, with crypto, it's a lot cheaper and it's faster. You know, you don't have to wait for 3 days to settle. Right? So, you know, and then I can also track the supply, you know, and do out the entire process. So not just transparency, my fees will be lower, and we don't need the middleman anymore, right? We don't need the banks. Why do we need to pay all these fees to the banks?
And we don't need the platforms. So this is really cool. If you think about the long tail, the big promise of the long tail was like, you know, that every creator could get paid. But in fact, when you're in the long tail, you're only selling 1 or 2 copies of your song or your book or your movie, right? With crypto, what could happen is that, you know, in that long tail, and that basically long tail is really good for the platform, an Amazon or an Apple or something like that. If we think about crypto, it could actually be distributed. And I think there's a really interesting thing, like as long as we're all on, like SVVR has that multiverse, a metaverse of metaverses. I think we can do that on the financial side, and where everyone can be participating, you know, much more equally.
When you think about it, this is a great flattener. It's a flattener of marketplaces. And so instead of having, you know, mega stars who are, you know, being followed by an audience, the megastar has to turn around and really figure out their audience.
Yeah. And all technology is disruptive, right?
Yeah,
and so now we've got now's the time.
it really means that the disparity between many different ecosystems that we've seen is flattening.